Phil, let's start with you, if we may. We just said in that introduction that rail plays such a vital role, doesn't it, in connecting people, places, and also opportunities. How can rail drive growth, do you think, in the Midlands region?
Yeah, so... Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I mean, for us, rail plays a really important part. We want to be here to support our colleagues here in terms of their ambitions. We're working very closely with the local communities and the local enterprises and the Grand Rail Collaboration, just to make sure that we're delivering the service that customers want. So, we're doing our best to make sure that we're supporting wherever possible, and collaboration is the buzzword, I guess, but it is a pretty important word at the moment, just as we're trying to come out, make sure we're delivering the right number of, the right capacity for the right number of the right demand. So, we're working hard at that, and it's the insight that comes from people around on the panel that gives us that best opportunity to get there.
Absolutely, and can you share some opportunities that you think can unlock longer-term growth in the region?
Yeah, so I mean, looking forward to the summer. We've obviously got the Commonwealth Games. There's a lot of work going on there. We're trying to make sure we get the right information to make sure that we can step up the service as and when we need to. And on the back of that, I mean, that's a superb showcase for the West Midlands, and we need to build on the back of that and actually get the growth going on the back of that. And I think the big investment that's going on in the area is Coventry. There's a new station being built there. We want to really sort of showcase Coventry. It's a fantastic station if you've not been there.
I haven't been to Coventry actually, but I'm looking forward to going to Coventry soon. Hannah, let's bring you into the conversation. Hello, Hannah, tucked away on the end there. Why is rail, do you think, so important when we're trying to level up our towns and cities across the Midlands and the North?
Well, I think rail has a really important role to play generally in terms of this question of levelling up. I suppose when you look to sort of what drives business growth, ultimately a lot of it comes down to infrastructure and connectivity. It's not just about being able to move your goods and services around, but it's also about how you transfer people and ideas and innovation across places. And I suppose so from my perspective, I sort of full disclosure, my background is more in northern policy than it is in Midlands, which is why I think this sort of slightly London-centric approach of talking about how fast we can get to London really missed the point of what connecting the Midlands and North was all about, which is, huge numbers of more, passenger connectivity numbers between the Midlands and North. The fact that if you were to deliver HS2 in full, which included the North, you would have given the North, for example, about 16 million people within an hour of the major cities, which is what London has at the moment. So, for the Midlands, it's an area which has traditionally received some of the lowest levels of infrastructure investment. Imagine what connecting these major cities could do for the productivity. Imagine the opportunities it opens. And it's not just, I suppose, about the rail infrastructure itself and the benefits it gives to the businesses that work in that sector, but it's also thinking about the businesses that are then attracted to a place because of the good connectivity. I mean, you only have to look at what's happening in Birmingham around Curzon Street. Another example that has been used a couple of times is King's Cross, obviously. I moved to London about 12 years ago, and when I told my parents I was looking at a flat in King's Cross, they were shocked and horror because obviously it has a history. They sort of told me, I didn't know at the time, they told me it used to be the red light district. I had no idea because all I saw was a King's Cross that was redeveloped, that was a place where you could go to get great food, to go shopping, to learn. You've got the University of Arts up there, you've got Google headquarters, things like that. So I guess it's kind of this point that it's not just about having really great infrastructure, it's about the opportunities it brings to the places and how attractive it becomes for other investment and for opportunities for young people across the country, really.
I think, Hannah, that is why actually I'm so fond of King's Cross, because when I moved to London 30 years ago, obviously I was a very small child, it really was the red light district, so I've seen the transformation. And of course, major rail investments do more than Hannah's just outlined. Well, they also improve quality of life, don't they, for individuals and communities, and that's a very important aspect of investment too, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the rail isn't an end in itself; it's a means to an end, and the connectivity and the infrastructure investment creates the opportunity to provide successful places at the end. And I like to think a bit about it, and transport people might get this reference in a kind of last mile sense. So you have a station, and around the station you want to create opportunity, and that opportunity comes in a variety of forms, from placemaking, investment in public realm or follow-on transport opportunities, to opportunities for growth, economic growth, jobs and businesses to grow. And I think when you are trying to maximise the opportunities that investment makes, the ultimate benefit is to people who are able to both work there, but also come there and enjoy it as a successful place. And I think the LEP, Great Birmingham Solihull LEP, has played a really strong role thus far in trying to build on the opportunities that the infrastructure that's come and is coming to the West Midlands has provided, and we hope that through that we will be able to secure this kind of amazing moment in time we have in the West Midlands, from the Commonwealth Games and the arrival of HS2, to really push on with that rebalancing the national economy and creating a real kind of sense of place and an opportunity for the people who kind of live and work in the West Midlands.
Talking about amazing moments in time, Martin, I hope you've had a long lie down after the City of Culture of Coventry 2021. I mean, you are our living, working example, really, of how rail can pull all these opportunities together. Can you tell us a bit about your year of culture and how public transport and rail was sort of central to that?
Yeah, I mean, the lie down is delayed somewhat, actually. We actually, because of COVID, we delayed the start of our year till May 21. So our year doesn't finish until the end of May 22, which is brilliant. So we've got a few more months still. I mean, certainly in terms of the delay, has meant that we attracted fewer visitors initially to Coventry, but we were always determined from the outset that not only would it be something special for the people of Coventry, we also recognised that it needed work for the region, and there's massive populations in our region, and I guess we obsessed less about getting people from London to Coventry, because actually what we wanted to do is to make Coventry and the wider West Midlands an amazing place to be, and people discover things on their back doors as well. The delay has meant that fewer visitors have come, but actually this next period means that our focus is very much about getting people to come from much further afield to make up for the lost opportunities that we had. So rail will be really critical to that, to make sure that we can build on the brilliant partnership they have with Avanti, who have been fantastic sponsors and partners throughout this kind of whole journey for us, and indeed have many, many other corporate partners and local authorities and enterprise partnerships and central government, of course, have recognised that these mega cultural or sporting events can start to redefine a place. And now what we're seeing is the infrastructure has caught up with that, has enabled that actually Coventry will have an amazing new station, and that will be a legacy of City of Culture. The catalyst for that investment was these moments, these major moments, and the city partners thankfully have invested appropriately. So yeah, the lie down will come, but so will many people, we hope, as a result of the investments happening in the city.
So I'd like to explore a little bit about collaboration. We mentioned there earlier on that it is the buzzword today, and often it is, having hosted a lot of these events, it's a theme that always comes out because it's so important. But how can it deliver infrastructure and customer benefits?
I mean, in terms of the infrastructure, I mean, we've been working very closely with the local authorities and with the Department of Transport. So, and I think the collaboration comes where we've had less competitive pressure during the pandemic. So we're in a different commercial world now, and actually there's some real positive benefits out of that. So we've been able to do some of the things that perhaps we wouldn't have done. We can run the most efficient timetable we've got. So we're working on the back of that to make sure that where we can sort of save money in one place, we can spend money in other places. So particularly at stations, and trying to get stations back up to where they need to be, because they've been sort of underinvested in. So working regions and stuff like that. So we're trying to get as much investment as we can in our stations, and actually the key thing for us is trying to get customers back onto the train, back working into the region. And actually sort of get back to what we've always been a premium payer, so we want to be back into premium payments and paying the government back to run the franchise.
And when it works well, Hannah, collaboration drives really positive, strong results, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of comes back to this point around what the benefits of this strong connectivity creates, and I suppose coming back to the collaboration point and the point that was made earlier in the sort of previous speaking slot was this idea about that connectivity along the journey and the collaboration along the journey, and sort of as someone who's I wish I used trains more. I drove here, I live outside of Leeds, and my driving journey was considerably faster and more convenient than it would have been to get the train, but it was a lot more stressful than I think a train journey could be or should be, and it kind of the role that collaboration plays, I think, not just within the industry but within the wider sort of public transport network, it's a really important sort of factor in terms of getting more people onto our rail network, into our public transport, and that kind of brings us back to another session as well, which is how it helps sort of achieve our climate change targets, which again is going to take a whole UK effort to get there. So yeah, collaboration is absolutely vital to getting this right and getting people on the trains basically.
And vital, Martin, for what you're doing at the minute with your City of Culture.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I see the kind of broad collaboration to make the festival happen, but actually it's about building the legacy that will come from that, meaning that multiple partners have to be committed long term, and not only kind of from a kind of destination management or marketing perspective, it's actually about how do we create the right environment for the right industries to build on the back of City of Culture. So big growth in digital, creative, cultural businesses in Coventry, and we need to make sure that the conditions are appropriate for those businesses to thrive, and collaboration through rail networks and other transport providers is key to attracting the right businesses to the city as well, to build on what we've started.
And keeping those links going. I mean, as you say, it's not just there for the year, is it? You're creating a legacy by what you're doing.
Yeah, creating a legacy, but also we're hoping getting influence across the wider West Midlands as well, and people kind of recognising that there's kind of good practice that's been established in Coventry which can be replicated elsewhere without the need for the big title. You know, the collaboration is, the title gives us an excuse to come together. It brings convening power, but actually it's replicable models elsewhere that others could learn from as well.
Ed, over the last decade, LEPs have been at the heart, really, haven't they, of regeneration in towns and cities, transforming places. To what extent does better rail connectivity ensure that the investments are benefiting local, national and international visitors? Well,
I think kind of clues in the name in terms of the connectivity that transport provides to allow economies to benefit from investment opportunities. So, for example, when we think about our geography, we're called the Greater Birmingham and Solihull LEP, but we actually include large chunks of southern Staffordshire and North Worcestershire, because that's what the economic geography of the region is, and those districts in those counties are serviced by their relationship with Birmingham and Solihull. So our investment in supporting perhaps station improvements such as those we did at Kidderminster, or the work we're doing at Perry Bar for the Commonwealth Games, or investment in public realm or electric trams in central Birmingham are about creating the opportunity for people from outside of the centre of Birmingham, where the investment is mostly coming, to enable to access those opportunities in a sustainable way. And Hannah talked about net zero. I think one of the things that makes collaboration successful and partnership successful is having a thing around which we can all agree. And if we're going to address issues of net zero and climate change, that's a job we've got to do together, and everyone's got to play their part. And so if we can all rally around the flag of net zero and climate change and see how we play our role, then we've got a much better chance of being able to address it.
Just spotted a question which maybe you can take for me, Ed, from the floor. Do you see apprentices and railway investments a way to break a cycle of community disengagement and underprivilege?
Apprenticeships are a way undervalued and underused opportunity to help people into the workplace. I think go back 50, 100 years, it was all about having an apprenticeship to then see you into a career for life, and then we all became obsessed with A-levels and routes into university, and practical apprenticeships became less popular. And for the last 5 to 10 years, there's been an opportunity to try and grow the role of apprenticeships to allow people who may not necessarily be suited to direct university education gain practical work experience alongside qualifications. And it's a real way, particularly in the transport field, for people to access investment opportunities from investment on their doorstep and get real world experience whilst they're developing their skills and education alongside it. So I think apprenticeships are a fantastic opportunity. We run an apprenticeship hub. There are a number of other opportunities around the West Midlands to access apprenticeships, and anything that people can do to kind of promote the value of them, I think, should be really supported.
Yeah, it's a subject dear to my heart actually. I left school when I was 17 and became an apprentice journalist and didn't go to university, and it's really nice to see it coming back and actually to be able to welcome, up to 10 I think we've got apprentices in the audience today, so
brilliant.
It's really nice for me to see that. We've touched a little bit, a tiny bit on this panel, Hannah, on net zero and climate change and stuff, but net zero targets of course are high on everybody's agenda at the minute. Why is rail so critical in meeting UK's climate targets?
Yeah, I think it's, it has to be at the heart of it. So I suppose there are two sides. That the sort of overarching context of it all is that transport emissions make up around a sort of a third of the UK's total emissions, and it's one of those really, really hard to reach sectors because it touches the consumer so much. So from a government perspective, it's quite hard to sort of regulate some of this and change behaviours on some of this, because ultimately that's your electorate. So it's a really difficult one, and the industry has to really step up in this space, but it has to have the right framework around it to deliver it. There are two sides, I think. There's the sort of commuting side, which is the one we all think of the most, and as I mentioned before, a lot of this comes down to making the journey more attractive for people, so it's thinking about every part of the journey. There are things that the government and the industry can work together on, so improving ticketing and having a sort of a more holistic system and simplifying fares and potentially reducing fares, as someone who wish they travelled more on train but find the cost quite a lot higher than it is driving. But I think there are also aspects that the businesses can be a little bit more proactive on, and I don't mean businesses necessarily in the industry, I mean the sort of wider business community in terms of encouraging their staff to use public transport. So really basic things like offering more flexible hours to allow people to travel at different times, and particularly off-peak, supporting salary sacrifice schemes to allow people to buy season tickets, and even going as far as to offer vouchers or coupons for people who do make that switch. That can potentially be even spent in local areas to help with things like regeneration in the community. So there's that commuting side that does need to be addressed, really important. Then there's also freight, which seems to be the sort of slightly kind of overlooked aspect of rail. So the stat that I've heard is when you have a freight train, it can take as many as 70 HGVs off the road. This is really important for two reasons. Firstly, because we don't have a good zero-emission alternative for HGVs at the moment that's really commercially viable. But secondly, we continually heard this, we have issues around HGV driver shortages at the moment. So it could really help unlock that side of the industry and sort of have a bit of a modal shift away from road onto rail. We know it's happening, so major food retailer has credited the fact that they've managed to keep the shelves stocked with the fact that they have invested so much in transitioning to freight, and they've committed to kind of continue doing that. So hopefully that's something that we see happen across the industry to help kind of get to this net zero stage for transport and recognising the role rail plays within it.
Phil, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work going on in the industry, and we talked about the collaboration thing, and there is a lot of work going on to make sure that there is sufficient capacity for freight. So it is something that we're all very aware of, and actually part of HS2 and that investment that's coming is about to free up more capacity, particularly for freight.
Which is a good sign, isn't it? Another question, Phil, that you might take from the floor. I mean, we've talked a lot about stations today, particularly in our debates this morning. What plans do you have to make trains more attractive to get customers back?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got several things going on at the moment. So we've got some new trains coming, which are fortunately more carbon efficient. So the binary trains, so we'll be able to run those predominantly under the wires on electric. So. But they're bigger capacity trains than the diesel ones that we've got at the moment. But we're also we've got £117 million investment in refurbing our Pendolino fleet. So we'll be having cafe bars and new seats and more seats, seat occupancy systems. So you'll be able to book a seat up until right at the last minute. So there's some really exciting things coming, and that's starting to get rolled out. The first train's out this week.
That sounds brilliant.
Into test. Won't go on the network for a couple of months, but
couple of months, but it'll get there. Yeah. Good. Martin, what role do you think culture plays in driving the economy at city and also regional level?
Well, I mean, substantial. I mean, it's absolutely, the direct economic impact is kind of unquestionable in terms of the jobs created and the economic value to tourism. I think that what it really is major impact though is about civic pride and how people feel about the place they're in, and of course that will attract inward investment as well. So it's, for me, City of Culture in Coventry has been much more about more than visitors. It's been about how we play relevant to other policy areas as well. So how do we help with health, education, general well-being, environmental policies as well. And so I think a good cultural programme, good cultural infrastructure can be at the heart of kind of economic regeneration of any city and place really. And City of Culture designations can help demonstrate that. It's not kind of the only panacea, but it's fundamentally I think it can be a real catalyst for extraordinary change in a city, and we're starting to feel that in Coventry, which is really exciting.
Good. Ed, how important is the role of the private sector in co-investing in rail connectivity, and how can this be leveraged further to perhaps deliver greener and sustainable solutions when it comes to transport and commuting?
Well, I think, as I said earlier on, if we're going to address some of these issues, it needs to be a genuine partnership, and the private sector, I think, are the people who can really start to drive some of this. Partly because I think it's increasingly in the private sector's interest to have a strong story to tell about low carbon, both in terms of its own operations, but also in terms of how it then talks about that to its customers. But one of the most important elements of private sector business is how they get their people to work. And so the easier that it can be for business to enable its staff to get to work in a sustainable, stress-free and low-cost way, it's got to be really, really beneficial. But certainly, we talked a bit about King's Cross, and I was very much involved in that when I worked in London a few years ago. And certainly the opportunity for developers and investors to see how they can contribute to unlocking sustainable transport solutions, be it rail or some other more smaller scale interventions, is really positive, and it's something we're seeing a lot more of these days. So a kind of shared recognition that joint investment will open up opportunities that didn't exist previously.
Phil, let's just touch on the West Midlands hub site, which has the potential to be the best connected place for people to live and work and play. How should rail play its role in the development of Arden Cross and central hub site development, do you think, over the coming years?
Yeah, so the other side of our business, so we obviously run the franchise services. The other side of the business is the shuttle operator for HS2. So we've got a team working on the shuttle operator side, sort of helping to shape policy and give advice about how best to make sure that we integrate. But I mean, they're working on all sorts of different timetable options and making sure that the integration of the conventional system and the high-speed network is optimally made.
That must be quite exciting for you, is it, to see that unfold?
Yeah, I mean it's really, really great. I mean, I think it's a start of a journey, and I think there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment about rail and GB, Great British Railways. So and actually the work that we're doing with HS2 is there to it's a 2029 earliest start. So we're looking really into the future and saying what's it going to be then, and how do we shape it, and being part of that is great.
We've got another question from the floor. We've spoken a lot about operations and infrastructure, but what role does property have to play? Anybody want to take that one? Go on then, Ed.
Well, I think we were just talking about Arden Cross, didn't we? And property is going to be the thing that makes Arden Cross a success as a place. So there's real opportunity to learn lessons from places where rail infrastructure and place making around it has been a success. We talked about King's Cross, but there are other examples around. But there's also the opportunity for existing property to be repurposed, refurbished, and change and evolve in response to infrastructure investment opportunities that come along. So, you might find a place that has had little investment is suddenly revitalised as a result of opportunities that come from that sort of transport investment. So really important role for property to play in the final part, but also sometimes in the interim as well. So when you've got places going through periods of significant change, infrastructure can sometimes take 10 to 15 years to deliver. There's opportunities for existing buildings or places to have temporary uses, which again can contribute to kind of evolving a sense of place and creating the basic infrastructure on top of which long-term solutions can be built.
Yeah, which is what we're seeing at Euston at the minute as that goes through its transformation. Final question to you, Hannah, it's a question from the floor. How do you see your role, well, it's generally to the panel, but as a leader, your role as a leader, to encourage small changes which added together make big differences? Each 1% change we all make adds up, and that's got hashtag planetary gains on the end.
That's quite a difficult question. I'm going to interpret the question in the context, perhaps, of the net zero points in that sense. But I suppose we approach it from the side that business really needs to work with their employees. Most people, work and they have a connection to their employee. And we did some work a couple of years ago called. Well, it's name changed, but I think it ended as Everyone's Business. But basically, we surveyed people, we surveyed the population. Most people find that they don't trust businesses, but actually they trust their employer. So I think one of the really big things from our side is encouraging businesses to speak to their employees in a way that people understand, as opposed to necessarily coming at it from this very top-down approach, speaking in everyday language and encouraging people to make change, but also facilitating that change and kind of creating the environment. So I spoke before about some of the things that businesses can do to encourage people to make small incremental changes. Other things as well that I know from my experience, so if you are fortunate enough to live in a sort of a cycling distance from your office, having the facilities in your office place to be able to shower and change afterwards, things like that. So I guess from as I say, from my perspective, it's a lot about how the business speaks to the employees and to the community and sort of facilitates this change from their side, as well as individuals sort of educating themselves, becoming informed and taking it upon themselves to make changes where they can.
Time has flown, which is a good sign. So massive thank you to all of you for joining me on stage. Really interesting conversation, and it's great to hear what you're all up to, and best of luck for the remaining City of Culture